Hello everybody, and I hope you're well, and thank you for joining me for today's Daf. Today we're doing Shevuot Daf 19, Amud A. And just following on from the last Daf, Rabbi Kiva Ayadei. The Gemara asks, and Rabbi Kiva, who does not expound the verses in this way, what does he say to this? The Gemara answers, he maintains that since the Torah needs to write both domesticated animal and non-domesticated animal in the verse, or a carcass of a non-kosher undomesticated animal, or carcass of a non-kosher domesticated animal, it teaches that halacha that the school of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi taught, creeping animal is also written, even though there is no novel element taught by the addition of that term. This is in accordance with what was taught in the school of Rabbi Shmuel. Every passage in the Torah that was stated and repeated was repeated only for the novel element introduced therein. It is the style of the Torah to repeat an entire passage to teach even one additional halacha. In this case, which was taught by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. The Gemara asks, and Rabbi Eliezer, who maintains that in general it is not necessary that an unwitting transgressor knows precisely which prohibition he violated, what does he do with the words in which he sinned? The words from which Rabbi Yeshua learned that there is no liability to bring an offering unless he knows precisely which sin he committed. The Gemara answers, according to Rabbi Eliezer, these words emphasize the fact that one is liable only when he intends to do the prohibited act, to the exclusion of one who acts unawares. So what does that mean? Parad hamis asek. Rashi explains the difference between an unwitting transgressor and one who sins unawares as follows. One who wishes to perform an act with a particular entity, be it a person or an item, but does not know or is mistaken about the halachic status, e.g. he thought the woman was his wife and she turned out to be his sister, or he thought that the food before him was permitted fat and turned out to be forbidden fat, is considered an unwitting transgressor, but one who intends to perform an act with a particular entity that is permitted to him and unawares, he performs that same act with a different entity and is forbidden to him. Such a person is considered one who acts sins unawares. Tosafot and others note that Rashi's examples with regard to sexual intercourse and forbidden fat are not precise, as a halacha is that even if one who engages in intercourse or eats forbidden fat unawares is liable to bring a sin offering because he derives pleasure from his action. The Riaz writes that this principle is with regard to sexual intercourse and forbidden fat is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, but the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer is that one who sins unawares is exempt even in those cases. The Rimigash offers a different definition of sinning unawares. One who intends to perform a certain act that is permitted, but ends up doing a different act that is prohibited, e.g. one who picks up a certain item on Shabbat but ends up detaching it from the ground. This is apparently the understanding of Rabbi Chananel as well. And they don't intend to perform the action, that is to say, if one was preoccupied with another matter and acting unawares, he transgresses a prohibition, he is not liable to bring a sin offering. Until now, the Gemara has discussed Chizkiah's understanding of the practical difference between the opinions of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan says there is no halachic difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva, as they both agree that one must know the exact source of ritual impurity. The difference between them is limited interpretation of the meaning of the verses, i.e., they disagree about the source in the Torah for this halacha. And something can be reasoned that Rabbi Sheshes says the difference between them is limited interpretation of the meaning of the verses. So Sheshes would switch the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer for that of Rabbi Kiva, and that of Rabbi Kiva for that of Rabbi Eliezer. He was not meticulous in his attributions of the respective opinions, as he held that there was no halachic difference between them. Rabbi asked Rav Nachman, according to both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva, if one had lapse of awareness of both this and that, his having contracted ritual impurity and his having entered the temple was halacha. Rav Nachman said to him, he has a lapse of awareness about his impurity and therefore he is liable. The Gemara disputes, on the contrary, he has a lapse of awareness about the temple and he should therefore be exempt. Halam Mikdash b'yadav ufaso. Rabbeinu Tam, so cited by Tosafot and other early commentaries, maintain that even according to those who hold that the person is exempt, he is exempt only from bringing a sliding scale offering. The special offering brought in the case of impurity in the temple is liable to bring a fixed sin offering, as he transgressed a prohibition which is punishable with karet when violated intentionally. Tosafot and others understand from the Gemara's wording and from the halacha governing other offerings that are brought for atonement that he is exempt from bringing any offering. Rashi said, we observe his behavior. If he leaves the temple because of the impurity, when he is told that he is impure, it's clear that the lapse of whence is that he had is about the impurity, and he's liable. If he leaves because of the temple, if one is informed that he's in the temple and he immediately leaves, it demonstrates that he had a lapse of awareness about the temple. If he is informed that he's impure and he leaves, it demonstrates that he had a lapse of awareness about his impurity, says Rashi. The Ridder suggests a different explanation. When people admonish him, asking him what he is doing, the nature of his lapse of awareness will become known depending on his answer, i.e., whether he asks, was I perhaps impure, or did I perhaps enter the temple? Tosfot and others claim that the nature of lapse of awareness cannot be determined by his reaction to the notification that he received, as it is possible that he would also have left immediately if he were told something else. Nor can it be determined, as Ridder claimed, from the words that he uttered, as perhaps he mentioned only one of the issues but had a lapse of awareness about both. Rather, Rashi means to say that sometimes one's lapse of awareness can be determined through a clarification of which issue he had forgotten to a greater extent. For example, if, when notified about the impurity, he would remember that he was in the temple, when notified that he was in the temple, he would not remember that about the impurity. The lapse of awareness is about the impurity, and vice versa. Tosfot also offer a different explanation, that the triple of his lapse of awareness is assessed according to the last notification that he received. And ultimately they informed him that he was in the temple and he left. It is a lapse of awareness about the temple and he is exempt. But if he was last notified about the impurity, it's lapse of awareness about the impurity and he is liable to bring an offering. I.e., when he is told that he is in the temple, then the lapse of awareness that he had is about the temple and he is exempt. Ravina said to Rav Ashi, there is no indication from here. Didn't he leave because he became aware of the temple, only because he became aware also of the impurity? Otherwise, why would he have to leave the temple? And didn't he leave because he became aware of the impurity, only because he became aware also of the temple? Otherwise, why would he leave the temple? Well, there is no difference. There is no indication from here. The Gemara begins a discussion about another topic related to the awareness of impurity. The sage taught in a Braita, if there were two paths in a certain place, one of them impure, as a corpse was buried there, and one of them pure, but it was not clear which of the two paths was impure, and someone walked on the first path and did not then enter the temple. After he walked on the second path, forgot that he was richly impure, and entered the temple. He is liable to make a sin offering, since he certainly contracted with impurity on one of the paths and entered the temple in a state of impurity. If he walked on the first path and entered the temple, and on the third day he was sprinkled with the water purification to purify him from the uncertain impurity imparted by a corpse, and on the seventh day he was sprinkled upon again, and he immersed himself in a ritual bath, thereby completing his purification, and then afterward he walked on the second path and entered the temple. He is liable to make a sin offering, since one of the paths was certainly impure, and he entered the temple after having walked on it. Rabbi Shimon deemed him exempted in this latter case, because neither time that he entered the temple it was certain that he was impure. The first time he might not yet have become impure, and the second time he might have already purified himself. And Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, deems him exempt in all of these cases. The Gemara asks, but does Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda really exempt him in all of those cases? That's the end of the Lamed. Thank you very much for listening, and all the best. Bye.